Have you ever imagined what it would be like to live in a greenhouse? Well, I have, and now your Sims can try it out as well. Hello, I'm Goldsea and this is my very first video building in The Sims 4. I got two other channels, that being Planet Coaster and Minecraft, but that hasn't quenched the thirst for architecture yet. I love building in The Sims 4 and I thought I have a unique building concept I'd like to share with you. As you can tell, I started building on an angle which I instantly regretted, as it made things way harder than they had to be. Although I think it is nice to sometimes place buildings in your world that aren't all on a grid. I mean, 45 degrees is still on the grid, but you get the point. And yes, of course, this build will be uploaded to the gallery as well. So feel free to download, play around with it and adapt the build to your own liking. Now, as this is the very first video of The Sims for me, I'm not sure if you're gonna be enjoying watching. So please let me know what you thought. Thank you in advance. Now, if you didn't know from the last 4 times I mentioned it, this is the first video. I have built in The Sims before quite a lot. This was about like 5-6 years ago. That's when my sister and I played the game together and she just wanted to play with The Sims and evolve them through life, but was never very interested in designing buildings and didn't really know how that worked. So I took that task upon me very happily and made a lot of buildings for her Sims to live in. Now, because I thought of something unique that I hadn't seen before in The Sims, maybe it's out there, I don't know, I thought I'd share this one with you. For this one I used the speedbuild format, which I hope shows everything off nicely. As you can see, I started building the outer part of the building already, and I made distinct partitions between the greenhouse and the actual living spaces. Now, not all living spaces will be in the enclosed part, but like the bathroom and the bedroom, they should be slightly more enclosed. Now, in the big greenhouse itself, which extends on either side of the building, I'll be placing in lots of plants, of course, outdoor living space, but still inside. So I can easily put in some warmer climated plants, just a dining table and some lounge chairs. This will be a very comfortable space to sit in, if it isn't scorching hot outside, of course. Now, for the bigger area, I plan to put a pool in later with most of the plants. And on the other side will be just a little picnic area with more plants as well. For the outer parts of the glass walls, The Sims 4 has added a nice little wallpaper for that. When I started to play this game originally, that wasn't in there, so I'm very glad it is in now, because otherwise I would have to do that with windows all throughout and I think that wouldn't look very good. Now, I wanted to make these spaces open and breathing, so I went with 2-story high design and opening the ceiling to give a massive open space inside. I did, however, put the floors on the smallest elevation, as otherwise it would just look way too stretched out. It needs to be big but not oversized too much. Now, of course, this building will have plenty of windows also on the living quarters, as this should let in a massive amount of natural light for all the plants to grow in. This is probably not meant for a sim that doesn't want to be on display. Now, later in the video I'll also make sure to put plenty of trees around this build to shade a bit from onlookers, but still this will be very open. Of course, the living quarters in the middle will be on the smaller side, but I made sure to leave plenty of space enough for a bathroom and a bedroom. These rooms should be a bit more private, of course, with the Sims able to shut the curtains. Now, the style of this build will be a bit more contemporary in the overall shaping of the build and in the materials used. I didn't want to make it too modern or futuristic and also not like a barn feel. This needed to be a mix of the both. Now, in the inner part I also added some sticking out walls from the lower section of the living quarters. This is because I wanted to add a balcony up top, so you get a great view over the greenhouse, as I thought it would be nice to have a balcony right off your bed, to look at all the tropical plants just after you wake up. Also, it was a great excuse to just extend the living quarters slightly, as they are very cramped now. But I think overall, when I put all the furnishing in, it's actually plenty of space enough for a family of 2. That's probably the maximum amount of Sims you could realistically add to this build. Otherwise, some of them need to sleep on the lounge chairs. Which, I mean, it is possible, but that's not great. I imagine the Sims that could live here are single or partners that are very intertwined with nature and absolutely love to be in the green. Of course, living in this greenhouse will be a dream for gardeners, and I would imagine the people living here are a bit more eccentric and take distance from the city life. Ideally, I would have loved to put this greenhouse in the middle of nature somewhere, and I hadn't mentioned that, but this is the full base game. No mods, no custom scenery, this is just the free base game, so anyone can download it without any issues. But that did mean that I didn't have any special worlds available to me. Only the starter, the deserty world and Newcrest. I've never been too involved with all the DLCs that this game contains. But anyway, back to the lasting of the walls, I made sure to not leave the flat walls with the glass panes in, as that would look very structurally unsound. So I added in big black pillars, fitting in with the contemporary style to give the building a bit more strength. Also, the roof I wanted to make a bit more circular, which you can actually quite easily do with the roof tools the game provides. Also, the glass that I was able to put on the roof really helped to sell the greenhouse effect. For the living quarters in the middle, I went with a more corrugated iron style, or zinc roof I think it is. It's not really corrugated iron. Anyway, that shouldn't have too much of a look in from up top. And with just a few house room plants, it didn't have to have too much light inside. And now it is finally time to start working on the inside, starting with the biggest greenhouse room. I first marked some spaces out with curbs for some green patches to go in. Now of course this needs to be a living space, but there also needs to be plenty of greenery. Otherwise it's not much of a greenhouse, but more of just a glass house. Now I didn't mind the green being very vibrant, as a lot of light and moisture has entered the plants. Now on the outside of the plot I will add some more dirt, as that will make it look more natural. The green outside now is way too vibrant. On the pool side I of course added some lounge chairs in, as they are very necessary near the pool and provide some extra seating areas. On the other corner of this greenhouse section I wanted to add a big dinner table. The middle section of the build where the living quarters are is a bit too small for such a big table, so I thought this would be a very nice place to sit. I can actually imagine myself sitting out here, having some dinner in the sunlight, always dry, no wind, no insects. Perfect. I also put an easel in the corner, as this space is sure to provide ample of inspiration for painting. Now it is finally time to add in all the plants in the building. As this is kind of my first build in 6 years, I really had to figure out what kind of plants I have. And in the base game there aren't too many of them. Especially tropical plants, there's like 3 or 4 of them that could somehow fit, but I think I really made it work. Of course the palm trees really steal the show, as those are the biggest statements of the build. Also the smaller, thicker palm trees really do help to bring in that color and that thicker vegetation. With a few of the plants in it looks a bit barren, but the more you add into it, and you can actually add quite a lot into it without it looking messy. That's the beautiful thing about plants. It doesn't have to be all orderly and organized to make it look good. It can be messy and all overgrown, as I think you would expect in a greenhouse, which gives a very warm and wet environment. With the plants, and this is not a tropical plant, more of a deserty kind of thing I think, but this spiky plant really helps to bring in a different kind of texture, not a dull green color. Not everything needs to be too vibrant of course. I do love to see how much this build transforms by just adding a bit of greenery in. Not just the green grass patches, but all the flowers sticking up and covering a bit of the windows on the outside. If these windows would have been completely empty and nothing would be looking through, they would look quite out of place and very industrial. Now later on I've also found this small fern, which I imagine everyone knows is in the game. I didn't anymore, but that really sold the deal and made everything look very lush and full. Now after finishing this last side part with greenery and putting a rug under the table, it's finally time to fill out the pool a bit. I was definitely not struggling to find a pool header for 5 minutes. Why wasn't it on the stairs? I don't know, and it was in a different tab than the pools. It was kinda strange. So I went with some plant pots, as that would provide more gardening opportunities. Although I mentioned this house is a gardener's dream, there wasn't actually too much for gardening sims to do. That's why I added these plant pots, which I hope help with the planting skill. I put in some lighting around the pool and all around the build, as it really needs to be nicely lit up even at night. And finally, after a long while of searching, I found the pool ladder and add some mosaic tiles on the floor. And with that, finishing off this entire section of the greenhouse. Now it is finally time to move inside to the living quarters. Speaking of inside, I struggled a lot with this one. It is a very tight space, and I came across the consequences of building a building on an angle. That being that the stairs don't work. I couldn't have imagined really that the stairs don't go diagonally. I think that's really weird, but yeah, it just doesn't work. So I spent a lot of time playing around with all the placements in this small room. And of course I cut out most of it because that's way too frustrating to watch. It was frustrating for me, but On video, that's even worse. I decided on using the left back corner for the kitchen, with L-shaped counters, a fridge next to it, and the stoves facing the dining room, all squished under the staircase that is diagonally in the center of the room. At first it starts looking out a bit weird, but I think this really works. It's quite a unique placement, but again, this is quite a unique house, so I think it can be forgiven for breaking the standard. I was looking for some cabinets that would fit with the counters, but I couldn't find any. Apparently they aren't matched one-to-one in style, so I just decided to leave them out. Otherwise I had to place them in front of the window, which would look weird anyway. For a building for such a small size, I think I did squeeze out quite a large kitchen with a lot of appliances, and I just realized I completely forgot to put in a sink. That's not handy. Maybe wash your dishes in the pool then. I don't know. That needs to go in before I release this to the gallery. Anyway, I had to back up the stoves as they now are just sitting in the middle of the room. I tried to add a half wall into the back of it, but that didn't fit entirely underneath the stairs, so it looked just a bit off. So then I started thinking, should I add a bookcase in front of it? And later I just added some kind of board at the back of it, just to fix it up a bit. But then again, later went back and added some art piece in front of it, which made it all come together. For this little corner I wanted a 4-seater table for serving breakfast or playing board games, for example, and it just about fits in this little corner. And this is where I found that centerpiece to go in the backing of the stovetops and the ventilation. Now at this point, for some reason I figured that I wanted a color scheme that made this build pop a bit, and I landed on yellow. There's really no reason why it would be yellow. I think the only reason that could be made up for it is that it's very colorful and bright, like the rest of the greenhouse. But yeah, yellow it is, and that's throughout this entire interior, meaning the bar stools, chairs for reading, lamps, etc. Now I made this little bit stick out just a bit further, as I had to fit in a downstairs half bathroom for the Sims to go in, and it needed a bit of privacy. Of course, the Sims in this house would be used to being on display, but being on a toilet next to open windows, that's less ideal. So just a small room to the side was made, with just a toilet, a sink and a plant. Also a garbage can, as that would be useful. Speaking of the garbage cans, I added the other ones as well for this build, as I forgot about them as well. Not nearly as annoying as forgetting about the sink entirely. Anyway, now it's time to finally add the wallpaper in. This build looked like a construction site, even with all the details in, but that's because they were just plaster walls. I was trying around with a funky kind of wallpaper, but just landed on simple wooden slats, as I thought I would fit in very nicely with the natural and contemporary vibe. The bathroom is finished off very simply, as it's just a toilet and it shouldn't be too flashy for this build. Also adding in some simple lighting to make all the colors pop, and finally adding in some light fixtures on the ceiling. I went with few different options, with a simple bright spot in the bathroom, some lights with 3 fittings, and a little more iconic lamp over the breakfast table and a standing lamp near the book nook. And with those last additions, it's finally time to move upstairs. For the upstairs, I wanted to make a simple TV room, as that didn't exist yet in this building. I was left with a very awkward space up top here, because of the staircase running through the middle of the house, but I think a little setting area in front of the TV here really works. Also with the bright yellow couch, you can see the yellow theme coming through again. Now I added in some light fixtures as well in the beginning, because now I already knew the layout of the build, kind of. Except for just a little area that needs to be the master bathroom. This is gonna be a small, awkwardly shaped room, but there's plenty of space to add in a shower, a toilet, and a sink. I guess that's why the sinks went into the bathrooms. It's not very nice for dishes, but you can wash your hands at least. And then to quickly get rid of this new build cement look, I already placed in the wallpapers, as now I already knew what kind of wallpapers I wanted. So I copied them from downstairs to the upstairs as well. The bathroom wall on the outside will have a little feature color, the same goes for the little half wall around the staircase. The rest of the walls will still have wooden slats everywhere. I was also left with a little nook with nothing in it. I thought this would be a great place to put in a desk with a computer on top to give a space for working. And finishing off this entertainment room with a rug and some paintings on the wall to make it feel more alive. Now when it comes to the bedroom, I went with something very contemporary and very simple. Just a simple stylish bed in the corner next to the balcony, and on the other end a simple bookcase for reading, and of course the signature 2 yellow chairs in front of it. Still don't know why I chose yellow. If you download this house and don't like the furnishings or the color of it, it is very easily changed. Of course, the overall layout and configuration might be a bit difficult to change, but I think overall this gives a very nice and cozy vibe. I still also add in a little wardrobe, or just a dresser in this case, because there's not really a space for the wardrobe. I could have made this building much bigger, but that would look not very great from the outside and would be unreasonably big. So I was just figuring out what kind of color I wanted. The bedding had no yellow color, which was a great shame, and I didn't think the dresser had the yellow color as well, but apparently it does, so of course it had to be yellow, why not? Then moving the bed away a bit from the windows, because I wanted to place in all the curtains. This is the more private area of the building, and with so much glass, it's really nice, I think, to have curtains that you could be closing over the windows for some more privacy. Also in the bathroom I added a little different curtain, as I don't think this should be a fabric curtain. That would go very moldy and sticky and all gross in the bathroom. I wouldn't want that. And that brings us to the last part of the house, that being the other smaller side of the greenhouse. This little area will be decorated similarly to the other side of the building with the bigger greener space, but this side will just feature a few planters with palm trees, lush vegetation and a little picnic table on the side. I imagine this place is more for a relaxing kind of vibe, away from everything else from the house, and because of course the sun turns around in the sky, this will give the option to different shadows or even more sunny spots. Also, you just saw me extend the balcony up top. This had to be done because I extended the bathroom a bit into this section of the greenhouse. A bit of ventilation is good, but a completely open roof in the bathroom, no thanks. I also do really love these lanterns that are hanging from the pillars. Those are one of the first things I put in, but they're really nicely detailed and fit in perfectly with the style. Now all the plants and trees are in. I also put in the telescope that I mentioned before on this balcony. And that brings us to the last part of this build, that being the outside. I wanted to make some outside terraces, on the back for stepping out and on the front a bigger terrace for arriving guests. Up front I also cut out a little hole in the foundation because I imagined that would be a great spot for a tree. Just a little design feature to break up the monotony of it. And with some fountains added in the little ponds up front, this brings us to the nature section. For this little opening I had to decide on a tree, which took me a bit as you can see, and with a little bench in front of the tree finishing it off, it is now time to paint the ground, put it in a little pond and fill the entire garden with trees to give some privacy back to the inhabitants. I just simply painted the dirt path in front, lined by some cobblestones and a little pond in the middle, all surrounded by a few plants and vegetation. There's nothing too difficult or unique here, but this does finish off the build nicely. Otherwise it's just sitting in an open, very bright green grass field, which will make it look very out of place. So even though I'm not adding anything to the building anymore, this really does help the building itself. And with the garden filled out with some few temperate trees, I think this build is absolutely succeeded. Thank you very much for watching. I really love to hear what you thought of this video and if I should change anything. Any suggestion is welcome. Thank you very much. Please subscribe if you want to see more of this. I will be making way more of these videos, so I hope to see you then and have a great day.